They thought it was just another late-night stop. Two airport security officers, both in their 30s, eyeing what they believed was a suspicious traveler. What they didn't realize was that they were confronting the highest-ranking woman in federal law enforcement, and the entire nation was about to witness it. Her heels echoed in even, deliberate clicks across the polished floors of Reagan National Airport. No entourage, no spotlight. Just Veronica Ellison, 53 years old, newly sworn-in director of the FBI, moving with the kind of quiet authority that turns heads without ever demanding attention. She didn't need to speak to be heard. Her presence said enough. It was 9:38 p.m. The heavy warmth of DC's early summer clung to the terminal air despite the hum of air conditioning. She had just arrived from Seattle, a long day filled with high-level briefings, black coffee, red-eye flights, and top-secret updates. All she wanted now was her driver, a hot shower, and a few hours of sleep before sunrise brought another wave of classified briefings. She walked with intention, not urgency. Her slate gray pantsuit was impeccably tailored, not to impress, but to remind. Her shoulder-length hair was neatly pinned back, and her left hand clutched the briefcase that rarely left her side. Inside, documents with security clearance so high, most Americans didn't even know they existed. As she passed Gate 37, she noticed them two white male officers leaning beside a service kiosk. They didn't say anything at first, but she caught the subtle elbow tap, the almost imperceptible nod in her direction. They were watching her. Veronica didn't break stride. Her instincts, honed by decades in law enforcement, told her exactly what was coming. She had learned long ago when to keep walking and when to prepare. "Excuse me, Mom," one of them called out. "You traveling alone tonight?" She stopped, turned, and faced them. "Yes." "Can we ask where you're headed?" the other asked. She studied them calmly, not afraid, just calculating. "Is there a reason for this?" Her voice was steady, clear, composed. One officer squinted at her. "You fit a description," he said. Middle-aged black woman, gray suit, carrying a briefcase, possibly in possession of classified materials. Veronica raised a brow. "You mean I fit the description of a federal employee finishing her workday?" The taller officer took a half-step closer. "We're going to need to look inside that briefcase." She instinctively tightened her grip. "I don't think you understand who you're speaking to. I'm Veronica Ellison, director of the FBI." A pause, then a smirk. "Right," he said. "Got ID?" Without a word, she reached into her blazer and withdrew her credentials. The badge was unmistakable. She held it out. Neither man took it. One gave a short laugh and looked at his partner. "You think flashing a badge means we just take your word for it?" By now, people were starting to take notice. A teen girl with earbuds had slowed her walk. A woman pushing a stroller was glaring at the officers. Someone nearby lifted a phone. "I'm not flashing anything," Veronica replied. "I'm following protocol, identifying myself." "Protocol doesn't mean anything tonight," said the second officer. "You'll explain everything downtown." Her jaw tightened. She glanced around at the gathering bystanders, the cameras, the tension rising in the air. "Call your supervisor," she said, voice still calm. "Or better yet, call Homeland Security, now." But they didn't. One reached toward her briefcase. She stepped back. "Don't touch that. You have no legal authority to search it." "Hands where we can see them," the taller one barked. The moment shifted, loud, jarring, public. They closed in. She didn't resist, but she didn't comply either. Her stance was firm, her voice unwavering. "You're making a serious mistake." They weren't listening. One officer yanked her arm behind her back. The other unclipped a pair of handcuffs. Her briefcase slipped from her grasp and hit the floor with a loud thud. Gasps. Cameras clicked. The officers didn't look up. They had cuffed her. The decision was made. Veronica Ellison was officially in custody. But one phone call, just one, was about to flip the entire situation on its head. She didn't resist as the cold metal tightened around her wrists, but she didn't avert her gaze either. She stood tall, composed, while the silence around her grew louder than the clinking cuffs. The taller officer leaned closer. "You have the right to remain silent," he muttered, barely audible, like even he didn't buy the words himself. "Do you understand what you're doing?" she asked, her voice firm. "You're illegally detaining a federal official, right here, on U.S. soil. The younger officer, his name tag read M. Landry, snorted. "Ma'am, we're just doing our job. You're being uncooperative, and that's not helping your case." A small crowd had gathered now. Cameras were lifted like shields. People were watching. "I presented my federal ID," Veronica said. "I clearly told you who I am. I haven't resisted. But if you keep going without verifying my identity or contacting your command, you're walking straight into a disaster neither of you is ready to handle." "That's enough talking," Landry snapped, motioning toward a nearby bench. Still cuffed, Veronica was led over and forced to sit, not gently. Her briefcase lay nearby, ignored. Her blazer had slipped off one shoulder during the scuffle, a button now hanging loose. A woman in the crowd shouted, "Y'all really just arrested the FBI director." Landry wheeled around. "Keep moving." It didn't help. The murmurs only grew louder. Phones were still rolling. "Grab her ID," the older officer grumbled. Landry picked up the badge and credentials from where they had fallen. He stared at them, frowning. His jaw moved slightly as he read the document. Then he flipped it over, then again. "Devin," he said, voice dropping. "This looks legit." Devin, the taller one, stepped over and yanked the ID from Landry's hands. He stared at it, the photo, the federal seal, the security clearance bar. Then he looked back at her. "Where'd you get this?" Her expression didn't shift. "It was issued to me," she said evenly, "after 28 years in federal law enforcement. Likely the same career that trained the people who trained you." For the first time, real doubt flickered on their faces. Landry shifted awkwardly. "You could have just said." "I did," she cut in, 5 minutes ago. Then I showed you my credentials. You chose not to believe me." Around them, the crowd grew. TSA agents now stood at a distance, uneasily observing. A janitor had stopped mopping a few feet away, watching closely. Devin opened his mouth, but a sharp voice broke through his radio. "Terminal B, we've got DHS en route. Code 542, agents inbound." Devin stiffened. "What's 542? Landry asked, eyes narrowing. Devin swallowed. "Mishandling of high-priority personnel." Suddenly, Veronica's words started to land. She didn't gloat. She didn't move. She leaned back slightly in her seat and said nothing. Landry scrambled with the handcuffs, nearly dropping the keys. This is just procedure, ma'am." She rubbed her wrists slowly. "Stop calling me ma'am like it and does what you just did." Devin reached for her briefcase, offering it to her. She didn't take it. "You don't touch classified materials without authorization." His hand froze midair. For a moment, the entire terminal held its breath. Veronica stood and adjusted her blazer. She looked them both squarely in the eye. "You'd better hope your chain of command is better trained than you are." But it was already too late. DHS was coming. She now stood in the middle of the terminal, not flanked by agents or press but surrounded by a raw, public mistake. Her hands were free, but the faint red cuffs around her wrists remained. She flexed her fingers once, then again. She didn't wince, but she felt it. The two officers looked shaken. Devin wiped sweat from his brow. Landry couldn't stay still. They were quiet now. No one needed to explain what had gone wrong. Everyone could see it. Phones weren't just recording. People were waiting, watching to see what she'd do next. Veronica picked up her briefcase herself, dusted it off, and locked it. Then came a voice. "Officers, can someone explain what's happening here?" A man stepped forward, early 60s, black, sharp-eyed, wore a well-worn denim jacket. His stance said he'd spent most of his life in uniform, or close to it. "She told you she's the FBI director," he said, "and I can confirm it. I saw her on CSPA and just last week testifying in front of the Senate Judiciary." Landry opened his mouth to protest. The man raised a hand. "No, don't speak, just listen. You tackled her like she was a thief. I guarantee that woman's clearance outmatches everything you'd have ever handled." Veronica looked at him and gave a slight nod, not of gratitude, but recognition. Like to people who understood a different set of rules. Landry stayed quiet. Devin stepped away, pretending to adjust his radio. Another voice entered. A Latino woman, early 40s, wearing a Navy uniform. Her TSA supervisor badge gleamed on her chest. "Ma'am," she said gently to Veronica. "We weren't informed of any detainment. If we had known, You don't have to apologize for their actions, Veronica said plainly. The TSA agent turned sharply to the officers. You detained a high-ranking federal officer without contacting oversight. She didn't comply, Devin started. I did comply, Veronica said, her voice loud enough for everyone. I identified myself. I presented ID. I asked for verification. They refused. The agent blinked. We're going to need a full incident report. But before anyone could reply, a commanding voice cut through the air. Director Ellison. Two men in dark suits appeared, pushing through the crowd. One had an earpiece, the other wore a badge around his neck. Two more agents followed, speaking into radios. Their jackets read Department of Homeland Security. The lead agent approached her. Are you all right, ma'am? I'm fine, she replied, but they're not. He turned to the officers. Which one of you put hands on her? Devin opened his mouth. She refused. Stand down, the agent barked. Landry looked ready to vanish. Devin looked at the floor. The DHS team moved fast. One took a statement from the TSA supervisor. Another verified Veronica's identity with a biometric scan. The atmosphere changed heavy again, but quieter. Like the moment after someone realizes they've made a terrible mistake. I want every camera angle from this terminal, the lead agent said. And I want body cam footage from both officers. Internal Affairs will meet them when they sign out. This is insane, Devin muttered. The older black man stepped forward again. What's insane is that you thought you could treat her like any random black woman and no one would notice. Silence. Veronica adjusted the strap on her briefcase. I'd like to leave now. Of course, the agent said. We'll walk you to your vehicle. She didn't look back at the officers. Didn't pause for the cameras. Just walked forward. Her silence wasn't forgiveness, and they knew it. The walk to the black SUV felt longer than it should have. She didn't speak. The DHS agent beside her stayed silent, respecting her space, her pace. He didn't need to say anything. Inside the vehicle, Agent Sonia Del Vecchio was already waiting, sharp, composed. She'd been Veronica's protective lead since the day of her Senate confirmation. Ma'am, she asked, voice low, are you hurt? No, Veronica said evenly, just tired. Sonia noticed the red cuff marks, then looked away. I filed an alert the moment we got word. Terminal's full of press now. And there are already 3 video angles trending. Veronica didn't even blink. Let them trend, she said. Sonia nodded, slowly. They're scrambling, she said. Damage control. Internal Affairs already pulled the 2 officers from duty. Veronica gave a small shake of her head. Let them scramble. That's not my priority right now. A quiet pause. Sonia spoke again, more gently this time. That's the 3rd time in 4 months, Director. First it was the elevator incident at the academy, then the background check fiasco before the Denver briefing. Now this. Veronica finally turned toward her. I keep records, Sonia. This one just happens to come with video. The SUV cruised away from the airport, silence thick in the air, not uncomfortable, just heavy. It carried the weight of exhaustion, history, and the pressure of constantly having to prove what should already be clear. It wasn't new, just louder now. Halfway down the parkway, Veronica's phone vibrated. A known number, she answered. Director Ellison. The voice was aged, deliberate. Yes. Who's calling? This is Judge Harlan Bixby. I'm calling from Arlington. Yes, sir. I saw the footage. You handled that with more restraint than most people could have managed. I just wanted you to know some of us saw it for what it was. Thank you, Your Honor. And if it matters, he added, my grandson told me last night that you're the first public figure he's ever respected. Kid's 13. Thought you'd want to hear that. Veronica exhaled, the first real breath she'd taken all day. That does matter, more than you know. She ended the call and looked out the window. The lights of the city blurred past like nothing had happened. But something had, something important. And the burden of it didn't sit on her shoulders alone anymore. Back at the airport, things were unraveling. DHS agents had sealed off the area near Gate 37. Reporters were being held behind retractable barriers. Airport spokespersons paced with scripted statements. In a staff security room, Devin and Landry sat in opposite corners. Landry had his head in his hands. Devin was pacing, fists tightening and loosening like he could wring the situation back into control. You think it's over? Landry muttered. Devin didn't answer. Then the door opened. A federal investigator stepped inside. No greetings, no small talk, just authority. You're both on immediate suspension, he said flatly. Your badges and sidearms are now in our custody. You are not to speak to the press, and you are not to contact Director Ellison. Understood, Landry nodded. Quiet, broken. Devin scoffed but stayed silent. 2 sealed folders hit the table. You'll each have a chance to make a statement, the investigator continued. But let me be clear, this isn't disappearing. The woman you humiliated isn't just the Bureau's director. She's a decorated federal servant with more security clearances than most of us will ever touch, and the country is watching. Landry tried to speak. We didn't mean. But you did, the investigator cut in. And that's the problem. Back in the SUV, Veronica's phone buzzed again. A message this time from her goddaughter in Florida. I'm proud of you. Don't let them break you. They're not ready. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Sonia. Yes, ma'am. Call the media office. Schedule a press briefing for tomorrow morning. I'll write the statement myself. But what she intended to say wasn't for the cameras. It was for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. At 9 a.m. sharp the next morning, Veronica stood behind a brushed steel podium in the FBI's press briefing room in Washington. The Bureau's seal gleamed behind her under the spotlights. A wall of cameras faced her. Reporters buzzed with anticipation. She wasn't there to express outrage. She wasn't there to wear pain. She wore a deep navy suit, every line crisp. No teleprompter, just her. She looked out at the room. Let's not waste time, she began. You've all seen the footage. A pause. I was detained at Reagan National Airport last night by 2 uniformed officers. I identified myself clearly, presented official credentials, and complied with their requests. I was still handcuffed. I was still accused of impersonating a federal officer. My identity was not questioned, it was ignored. Her hands rested calmly on the podium. This is not the first time something like this has happened. It likely won't be the last, but it wasn't just about me. It was about how, in the year 2025, seeing a black woman in a suit still leads some to assume threat before authority. She paused. The silence was full. My response today is not about vengeance. I don't want those officers ruined, I want them educated. I want the systems that shaped their response to stop teaching suspicion over service. No one moved. I'm not asking for apologies. I already got those knees bent, voices stammering, once they realized who I was. But that regret wasn't born from understanding. It came from exposure. And if shame is the only way our society learns, then we are still failing. She stepped away from the mic. I'll take a few questions, a reporter called out. Director Ellison, do you believe race played a role in what happened? She didn't flinch. If I had worn the same suit, carried the same credentials, spoken in the same tone but had a different face, I would have reached my car in 5 minutes. Do you plan to press charges? No. I'm not seeking punishment. I'm seeking reform. What happened wasn't personal. It's structural. I didn't build the pattern, but I live inside it. And I'm not here to snap to links. I'm here to melt the chain. Last question, how are you feeling today? Veronica's voice was even, angry, but focused. She left the podium. No more words. She didn't linger. Later that day, in a quiet Justice Department conference room, the 2 officers were summoned not for punishment yet, but for dialogue. Veronica met them alone. No cameras, no aides. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a pitcher of water. Devin sat rigid, arms crossed. Landry looked exhausted. Veronica entered in rolled-up sleeves, no blazer. She didn't sit. Let's talk, she said. They exchanged glances. I'm not here to yell, she added. This isn't a performance. I just need you to understand what really happened yesterday. She opened a folder, pulled out a photo. This was me at 30, my first day at the academy. Another photo. This was after my first arrest. She placed a third. This is my father. He spent his life fighting for civil rights. He believed the system could be better. She looked up. Yesterday, you told him he was wrong. Landry dropped his eyes. Devin said nothing. You saw me as a threat because I didn't match your idea of authority. But authority doesn't look like one thing, doesn't speak in one dialect. And it damn sure doesn't only show up in one skin color. Silence. You made assumptions. That's human. But if you carry a badge, being human isn't enough. You have to be better than your instincts. She closed the folder and walked out. By midday, headlines spread. FBI director meets with officers behind closed doors, delivers lesson without condemnation. Clips of her speech went viral. Analysts debated every word. Civil rights leaders called it a turning point. Veronica's image, steady, composed, unapologetically strong, wasn't framed as a victim, but as a leader. And then she vanished from the spotlight. No interviews, no tour. Just back to work. She didn't want the moment. She wanted change. Days later, the Justice Department announced a new initiative, training led by Director Ellison herself, focusing on bias recognition, verification protocols, and officer discretion. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. A quiet shift was beginning. Veronica received hundreds of messages from parents, from fellow agents, from young people who saw themselves in her poise. But one letter stood out, no return address. Plain envelope, handwritten, inside, one sentence, "Dear Director Ellison, I." The letter was handwritten. No signature, no name, just words pressed hard enough to leave an imprint. "I saw what happened at the airport. I'm a retired officer, white, born and raised in Ohio. I spent most of my life believing racism was a flaw other people had, never me. But I understand now. Watching how you stood your ground, how you spoke not with rage, but with strength that didn't make me angry, it made me ashamed. I'm going to spend whatever time I have left becoming the man I thought I already was. Thank you." She never shared that letter, never framed it, just tucked it in the back of a drawer. She didn't need anyone to see it. It had already done what it needed to. Meanwhile, Devin and Landry were reassigned desk duty, pending formal review. The media had moved on, chasing fresher stories, but their names still lingered in public conversation like smoke after a fire. Landry, quieter these days, submitted a request to join one of the Bureau's new internal bias training initiatives. Devin didn't. Their paths were beginning to diverge, even if neither said it aloud. Inside Bureau headquarters, Director Veronica Ellison flipped through a thick stack of case files. A soft knock broke her focus. Sonia peeked in. "Your next group is here, students from the Arlington Youth Civics Program." "They're a little early." Veronica stood without hesitation. "Good. Let's not waste their time." She stepped into the corridor. 24 high schoolers stood lined up, some whispering, others wide-eyed. A tall, freckled boy near the front blurted out, "You really shut down to cops just by talking." She gave a faint smile. "That's not what I did." Another student raised their hand. "Then, what did you do?" Veronica paused, then answered plainly. "I made them see me not who they assumed I was, not who they imagined. Just me." Silence settled over the group. "I know the world will try to shrink you," she continued. "You'll be misread, misjudged, misunderstood. Don't let it make you bitter. Let it carve you into someone stronger. That's how real leadership is born." Afterward, a student asked if they could take a photo with her. She nodded. As they stood side by side, he whispered, "My mom's a bus driver. She cried watching your press briefing." Veronica nodded gently. "Tell her I said thank you." She walked them out herself, one hand resting at her side, the other gripping the leather handle of the same briefcase that had once hit the floor of an airport terminal. The bag hadn't changed, but everything else had. The lesson wasn't hers alone anymore. It belonged to anyone willing to carry it forward. Later that night, long after the halls had emptied, Veronica remained. Her office light was the only one still burning on the 8th floor. She sat quietly, blazer draped over the back of her chair, sleeves rolled, reading glasses in one hand and a worn folder in the other. The building around her was silent, except for the low hum of ventilation and the occasional soft click of turning pages, but her thoughts weren't really in the case files anymore. Her gaze drifted to a small photo frame on her desk, black and white, slightly faded. 23 years old, standing straight on the steps outside Quantico, her first day at the academy. That was the day her mother called, voice shaking. "You really did it," she had whispered. "You kicked the damn door down." Veronica hadn't cried then. She was too focused, too determined to prove it wasn't a fluke. She remembered how those first weeks felt, tight knots in her stomach, unfamiliar stares, her name spoken like it didn't belong. Her shoes were worn, Her paycheck barely enough. But her walk was steady, because it had to be. There were whispers, cold shoulders, disrespect, sometimes blatant. One firearms instructor had once skipped her name during qualification. She corrected him firmly, loudly. He never forgot it again. She carried every slight, every dismissal, not to carry a grudge but to carry fuel. She'd gone home some nights, kicked off her heels, and sat on the floor in silence just to feel the ground. And still, she pressed forward. Every interruption, every dismissal. Every time someone talked over her in a room full of suits she remembered, not for revenge, for this. Her phone buzzed, a soft vibration against the wood. A calendar reminder lit up the screen. 6:45 a.m., Task Force Committee breakfast briefing. She silenced it, then opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside were the cases that had defined her early years: gang investigations in Missouri, missing teens in Nevada, a high-risk intel op near El Paso no one believed she could lead until she did. Beneath the files was a folded letter, creased from being read too many times. Her father had written it the day she became deputy director. They will test you. They will question how you got there. Make them question how they ever thought you couldn't. She read it twice, then gently closed the drawer. There was nothing sentimental about the way she worked. No ego. No need for applause. But in the still, late hours, she allowed herself to remember, not to feel nostalgic, but to honor the cost. So much had been taken from women like her in silence. Now, her presence made noise simply by existing. At 11:18 p.m., she finally stood. She slid on her blazer, clicked off the lamp, locked the door behind her. The corridor lights cast long shadows along the polished floor as she walked toward the elevator. Each step echoed, and when the doors closed behind her, she let out a single breath, quiet, composed. She didn't cry, didn't smile. She just stood there, head high, shoulders back. Director of the FBI, no one could take that from her now. Because what they saw in that airport wasn't her story. What she did next, that's what history would remember.